know what you're all thinking. Why is he wearing a cravat? I don't know, inspiration struck. It's an ode to our French heritage here. So I'm going to be talking for the next few minutes about the product directions Dataiku has taken within the last few months, as well as the product directions we're planning on taking over the next year. I'm going to try to make it as non-salesy as possible and as in-depth as possible, while also trying to provide some insight around what I've been hearing from our customers and prospects while going out in the field and implementing a lot of this stuff. So going back to what we saw earlier and what we've talked about repeatedly, this idea of agents. It's funny because for the last year or so, since GenAI exploded, obviously, I've been working with the product team, and I've also been working with our clients on sort of two different separate concepts. One, well, both around GenAI, but one is GenAI in Dataiku, and the other is GenAI on Dataiku. When I talk about GenAI in Dataiku, I'm talking about things like using the prompt studio to apply a prompt to a data set and get some kind of output, or having many different options for LLMs being loaded up into Dataiku and the ability to choose the right LLM for the right workflow through a dropdown. So this is like your users are leveraging LLMs to do work. Using LLMs on Dataiku is more kind of this copilot type concept. What I mean by that is it is augmenting your user's ability to work within Dataiku. So if I'm trying to sit inside of a prepare recipe, who in here has used a prepare recipe? Wow, that's awesome. I've never had that many people raise their hands before. If you're inside a prepare recipe, you can now type in plain English text, I want to, parse all these dates and combine these different columns, and it's going to generate all the steps to do that for you. So that's AI prepare. If you're trying to describe a flow to somebody else, you can hit a button and it's going to build out a doc that describes that flow. If you're writing code inside of a notebook, it's going to generate notebook knowing about the Dataiku API. So these are very different things. One makes your analysts or your data scientists inside of Dataiku more effective, more easily trained, faster at working. And one is applying GenAI to actual problems that your analysts are doing. These two concepts that for the last year I've been talking about super separately, about think about this one or that one, come together when we're thinking about an agent. An agent is both an augmentation of analysts' work and an application of GenAI to the problems they're trying to solve in one package. It doesn't mean it replaces analysts or data scientists or engineers, but it is going to make a lot of the really bummer parts of their jobs go away or be a lot easier. And I say this as somebody who's been both a data scientist at Dataiku, a data engineer at Dataiku, sometimes a sales engineer at Dataiku. And a lot of the parts of all of those jobs are very painful. And I think that the promise of GenAI is not to take away the most inventive, intuitive, interesting parts of your job, but to take away the grunge and to always be able to provide a framework automatically built for the problems you're trying to solve. So how is Dataiku going to be helping you do that as we move into the future? We really have three kind of main concepts that we're working on and have been releasing features for, which I summarized right here. We are one, creating and accelerating GenAI use cases. You can think of that as kind of the in Dataiku concept. We're also adding lots of governance around these use cases, which means that as you build out agents, you can deploy them inside your organization with more confidence and more ownership from the IT perspective. And then finally, managing costs and monitoring who's using what, who's asking what questions, falls into this XOps category, which, yes, is about GenAI, but it's also about everything else you're doing within Dataiku. Regular old machine learning, keeping track of database queries, etc. It's all in there. So let's first look at GenAI use cases. There we go. Last year, Dataiku rolled out a set of capabilities, there we go, called LLM Mesh. LLM Mesh is it's actually quite easy to talk about because it's the same promise that we've been offering to our clients for the last, well, as long as I've been here, which is 8 years. So I guess probably a little longer than that, let's say 10 years. When Dataiku was created, it was, and when it expanded rapidly in the United States and had a lot of early success, we were basically, and the way I pitch it, is that we were the best tool in the world to sit on top of big, nasty on-prem Hadoop databases and make them actually useful for people, analysts, data scientists, data engineers, et cetera. So instead of 10 people at your company able to use your underlying Hadoop database that your IT org had just spent $20 million on, now 1,000 people could use it. Obviously, we're not all using Hadoop anymore, I hope. Well, it's still great, whatever. We've moved on, and now our data is often residing in tools like Snowflake or like Databricks or Synapse, wherever it might be. And we're also using things beyond scikit-learn or even beyond deep learning, which we also provided the same concept for. Scikit-learn or other ML tools, challenging, high learning curve, et cetera. Dataiku provides this layer on top that lets the majority of your organization leverage it in a safe, managed, regulated manner. We're offering the same exact promise with LLMs. Dataiku is not going to be releasing its own LLM. We don't have that many GPUs, so we just can't. Plus, they're all sold out until next October or whatever. However, we are going to we already are providing you the capability to access basically any of the popular LLMs on the market right now through a centralized tool, which means you can swap between them as necessary. The price of one goes up, you can just choose a different one from a dropdown. If one is more applicable to your use case, just as it's easy, we've separated the concept of a data set in Dataiku from a specific database. We're separating the concept of GenAI recipes or GenAI applications in Dataiku from a specific LLM. You're not rebuilding a vertical stack every time you're trying to switch between different LLMs. We also provide the ability to host your own LLMs. And we're very happy to mention that as of basically like this week, today, we've added 2 new partners into this ecosystem for self-hosting LLMs, both of which are going to be on stage later on today, which is obviously NVIDIA. They are, I'm going to mess up the order of these terms, NVIDIA AI Enterprise. Actually, I think I did that right. And Titan ML. I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about the difference between hosted LLM API services and self-hosted LLMs. If we think about, I have the data on what our clients have been using the most in the last 9 months, which of these services. So anybody want to guess what number 1 is, far and away? Not self-hosted. Self-hosted is number 2. Number 1 is Azure OpenAI. The reason, my theory at least, and why most customers are saying, and I'm not saying Azure OpenAI is the best. It's just the easiest for enterprise customers to accept because it's an API service and it's also on a cloud that they generally trust, right? So instead of going directly to OpenAI, organizations are going to Azure OpenAI. But rapidly gaining in market value, strength, whatever, are these self-hosted LLMs. Especially for organizations that are potentially building tools for third parties, they don't need to go get that third party's permission to then send their data off to OpenAI or something like that. They can host the LLM locally, and with partners like NVIDIA and Titan ML, you know that locally hosted LLM has all the correct stack of underlying packages and yada yada to make it work. Yada yada. Somebody will explain what that means better later. To make it work as well as possible. So I think there's great opportunities and great reasons to choose both hosted LLMs and self-hosted LLMs. If I'm building a prototype and Like, I mean, I use OpenAI all the time if I want to test something out, right? There's nothing wrong with that. When you're going into production, you do need to start thinking about, all right, is the cost per token versus the cost of maintaining infrastructure, which one's more expensive? Is the quality of the global model versus the quality of my local model? That was probably open source. What is the quality difference here? All of these questions come to mind. And what Dataiku lets you do is switch between them at the click of a button and get the different cost and get the different results and be able to compare very easily to make the best decision for your organization. This, in addition, let's do this. Clicky. Yeah. All right. In addition, we understand that people want to be able to very rapidly roll out chatbots. I actually think that chatbots are a very small proportion of like all of the cool stuff you can do with GenAI and LLMs. But we also understand that many times you're going to have an executive coming down and saying, "Hey, look, I need LLMs or I need GenAI in my organization right now, and to me, GenAI is chatbot. So show me a chatbot in 6 weeks." We make that incredibly easy. You can, using entirely visual recipes, let's say take a big set of documents, load them into using RAG, load them into a vector store, apply an LLM on top of that, and then have a web app. You can do that entire process in Dataiku very rapidly without even writing any code if you don't want to. So Dataiku Answers is this pre-built web app that you can roll out. It should be available to everybody very soon. We already have a lot of people using it. I just worked with a global retailer who's rolling it out internally across 10,000 people. It's basically like their answer bot on their internal portal. We're also being leveraged by a procurement team at a customer for a Q&A approach to contracts. And we're also being used by an investment relationship team to speed up the analysis of analyst calls. One final cool use case that I like to talk about is contract termination clauses. I know it sounds really, really boring, but I think it's a nice way of thinking about the entire process as a whole. What would like an agent be able to do if I've been assigned some type of problem? So I'm a business person here. I'm somebody in legal, and I've been told that I need to identify the termination clauses in 5,000 contracts and pull them out and identify the date within those termination clauses. And if there's no termination clause, say why. And if there's no date within the clause, say why. So I'm like, oh man, I got to hire 15 paralegals for 6 months to do this whole thing. Or I could go into Dataiku, create a very nice prompt using prompt engineering, and then pass all of these PDF documents through OCR to automatically turn them into a data set, and then apply that prompt to the data set, and now I have 5,000 termination clauses pulled out and answered. And of course, I'm still going to review all those, but instead of reviewing 10,000 50-page contracts, I'm reviewing 10,000 one-paragraph responses with the link to the exact section of each contract available to you. It's a boring thing, but it's actually incredibly powerful, and it's the type of use case that I think is going to be the pathway to LLMs across enterprises. It's like these existing analytics pipelines, or the analytics pipelines we always wish we could do, that are now like pretty immediately available. We could be doing this right now. That I think is really going to be exciting in the next 6 months. When we think about an agent, let's wrap this around with it, like wrap this concept around. Instead of somebody going in and building the OCR, building the flow in Dataiku to do that, instead that flow gets automatically built. An analyst checks to make sure that flow is correct, then it runs, and then the business person gets their results back. So we just keep on kind of abstracting the nitty-gritty details of the problem while still having humans in the loop at every point to check to make sure that it's working. That's the long-term idea here. As we roll out these long-term ideas, we obviously need a lot of context around keeping track of them. So we have recently rolled out LLM Cost Guard. It's essentially a dashboard that keeps track of all the costs that you're burning as you're doing all of these fancy things. We also have very in-depth usage monitoring, so you know exactly which users and which teams are using which components. We actually have usage monitoring for every feature of Dataiku. So you just as you could be tracking LLM spend, you can also be tracking your Snowflake spend or whatever else you're burning money on. And then finally, we're adding to our Govern. Govern is a subproduct of Dataiku that allows oversight over analytics projects, kind of like a Jira for analytics projects. Advanced LLM guardrails inside of that Govern. I'm not very good at clicking those buttons. Speaking of Govern, let's look in depth on what we're talking about there. So we'll have a GenAI portfolio one-stop shop. This is going to be a place where you can look inside of Govern and see all of the different GenAI projects that are going on inside of your organization. This is great for a manager, for an executive, to see the state of where everything is at. Is it deployed? Is it being used? Is it still under work? Is it failing, etc.? We're also rolling out an LLM registry inside Dataiku. This way you can track which LLMs are being leveraged or not leveraged, understand what's very successful and what's less successful. And then finally, as part of understanding the EAI Act, we are rolling out a readiness solution to keep track of this. We should be able to understand which components of your flows will be affected by the EAI, or the AI Readiness Act, and provide suggestions around how to resolve those. Finally, efficiency everywhere with XOps. I'm so bad at clicking that thing. So I want to talk a little bit about where Dataiku fits into a wider ecosystem. I had a major bank client in the EU, and they really wanted to roll Dataiku out into their production environment. But they had already decided where all of their models were going to be deployed. In this case, it was on SageMaker. So they decided that SageMaker is going to be their deployment mechanism for all their models. We didn't want to be just a prototyping tool, but we also understood that oftentimes, even if there's many tools inside of an organization where you're potentially building machine learning models, there's maybe only one place where you want to deploy things into production because you don't want to have 10 different teams tracking production workflows, right? So what we've done over the last year is make it so that Dataiku can both deploy anywhere as well as monitor everything. So now if I want to build a model in Dataiku, I don't have to deploy it on a Dataiku API node. Instead, I can deploy it to SageMaker, I can deploy it to Azure, I can deploy it to GCP. Within the next week or so, we'll be able to deploy it to Databricks and to Snowflake as well. So that's Snowpark Container Services and the Databricks Model Registry. And no matter which models are deployed across these different locations, Dataiku is going to keep track of them. And Dataiku can even keep track of completely external models. So if you want to use Dataiku as your centralized modeling tool, even if you're, let's say you build a workflow in Jupyter Notebook somewhere and you deploy it onto SageMaker, Dataiku can track that model, make sure it's up and running, ensure that everything is responding fast enough, etc., and give you a generalized dashboard, a universal monitoring dashboard for all your models in production. We think this is extremely powerful, and we think it really just solidifies Dataiku as a production-worthy player inside your entire ecosystem. We also have a lot more data quality monitoring around the data that's coming in and out of any given workflow. For a long time, we've had these things called metrics and checks. Who's ever used metrics or checks in Dataiku? All right, so a lot fewer people than the prepare recipe. They're sort of hidden under the status of any given data set. Metrics and checks were a little bare bones. We've drastically improved them. The new data ops and data quality monitoring allows for very, very fine-grained and yet easy control over understanding the data that's coming both in and out of any given Dataiku pipeline. I know it's not LLMs, and I'm ending on a non-LLM note, which probably I should be kicked off the stage for that, but it's still incredibly important. The fundamental components of an analytics workflow, good data in, good data prep, good data engineering, are not going to go away in the era of GenAI. They will still be here, and they will still be incredibly necessary to get actual value out of this stuff and not just junk. Dataiku is going to help you with that entire workflow. It's going to inject LLMs into it where you need it, but you're still going to have the whole pipeline, the whole vein, the whole flow. There we are. That's what we use. The whole flow of trust that Dataiku has always stood by. Thank you guys so much.